you're trying to keep the government out of your life, also try to be prepared to help yourself and don't always only count on the government to save you.
Hi, my name is Anne McElhenney,
And I'm Phelan McAleer.
and welcome to the Anne and Phelan Scoop.
Yes.
Well, later on, actually, we're going to be looking back on the year, on what we've achieved this year, the big projects that we've done, which we couldn't have done, by the way, without you, and without your support. And just on that note, actually, we have a matching donation. I think I mentioned it last week. We have a $50,000 very generous donation from one of our great donors, but it needs to be matched. And it needs to be matched before the end of the year. So anyone who can do anything to help us with that, whatever you give will be doubled.
Yes.
So it matters a great deal. I
If
mean,
we don't hit the 50,000 matching, we don't get the 50,000. We're close. I think we've raised 30,000 by now after our appeal last week. But we're still some distance away from the
Yes.
final. I don't know the exact figure, but we need
your help.
And I know many of you. Most of you actually donate. We have a great database. Some of you, don't get around to it. But if you had been thinking of doing it, please do.
do it now.
We're going to remind you of all the wonderful things we did last year.
Because of you.
Because of you.
And we're a very tight operation. We're a very small operation, but we do very big things. I mean, for the size of our organisation, it's incredible.
So how can
things we
people
do.
donate, Anne?
And people can go to unreportedstoriesociety.com, unreportedstoriesociety.com, and give what you can. We would be very grateful.
Yes.
What else is happening in the world, Phelan?
Well, what's on the show today? If it walks like they're sexualizing your kids, if it talks like they're sexualizing your kids, then they're probably sexualizing your kids. A Disney movie has bombed. It's the worst performance, I think, in history. But it's bombed because they don't want Disney pushing a message to their children, especially a teen gay one. And it's everywhere there. They're even pushing this nonsense in Netflix Christmas movies. So we'll be looking at that in detail.
And the World Cup, Phelan. You've been watching the World Cup. I've been not really watching the World Cup. But what's happening in the World Cup? In Qatar?
Well, in ongoing news, the USA team is still not very good. Oh!
Very controversial.
But in other news, we explain how the media are lying about fans' misbehaviour. And if you thought our piece about orphanages was controversial last week, please do write in, though, and tell us your thoughts on it.
Yes.
This week we explain why you should not be supporting so-called anti-slavery or human trafficking activists or legislation or not-for-profits. So we have interesting news, huh?
And it's going to be the last podcast of the year. We're taking a break. We're taking a hiatus, a sabbatical, mostly to work on a very big project that we have coming up next year. So so we'll tell you more about the break that we're about to take later on in the programme. And we're going to also talk to our dear colleague Magda, who, as you know, moved to Central Texas. And we're going to ask her about what she was surprised about, what she's disappointed about, what she's missing.
And?
Us.
And when she's coming back.
Oh, yeah, right.
With her tail between her legs.
That's right. We talked to a friend of ours the other day who said, Magda will be back. Magda will be back. I say, no, Magda will not be back. I think she is very happy there. We're going to hear more about that. We're going to hear more about that. But we're starting, Phelan, with this story about Disney. What brilliant idea have Disney just
Well, it's a holiday tradition. They brought out an animation in the movie theaters for Thanksgiving. It was called Strange World. And the normally sycophantic media to Disney, the trade media, they use word like bomb, historic bomb, historically worst movie ever for Disney. And why would that be? Like, why?
Shocking, because Disney, their content is usually just delightful,
yes.
right? Fabulous production values, great storytelling. So what's happened? What have they done
So they
wrong?
decided that the lead character in a Disney movie, a teen, should be gay, right? In a Disney animation, should be gay. So. And made a big thing out of it. So,
and this movie came out over Thanksgiving, right?
Over Thanksgiving.
Right, so over the holiday period, when people really do go to the movie theatres.
With their families.
This is what they were offering.
Yeah.
This is what Disney decided to offer.
The movie it's Jake Gyllenhaal plays one of the voices. It's got an all-star cast. Dennis Quaid, Gabrielle Union, Lucy Liu. Of course, it's diverse as well. Yes. Race-wise, but probably not opinion-wise. It features Daily Show contributor Jabuki Young White, you know, as the voice of what has been heralded as Disney's first openly gay character. Actually, it's not. There's been loads of gay characters in Disney shows
Of late.
and they've all bombed. They are determined to push. At this stage, it's beyond a message. Actually,
Yeah,
they
it's
are almost
indoctrination now.
bullying you to accept this as normal, bullying you to think you're the weirdo. They're now, you know, and Disney and I don't know, maybe in previous podcasts we talked about Bob Chapek. Bob Chapek, actually, on reflection, who was the head of Disney, who was replaced by Bob Iger, the old head of Disney. He's been fired because he tried to stand up to this, had a woke revolution from the workers that Bob Iger hired, and then did the worst thing, reverse course, apologise. And of course, the apologies are never enough. The apologies is just part of the process where you will be hung out to dry. He was then fired. Bob Iger's back. Bob Iger hired these people. Bob Iger greenlit all these movies.
Isn't it interesting as well, though? I think we heard this over the weekend that Bob Iger, kind of very bizarrely, so Bob Iger was ousted, right? But kind of ousted, but not really ousted. So that while he was ousted, he continued to work for Disney. Have I got that right?
Well, it's, you know, he was. They do this a lot of times. They keep people on as consultants. It's a way of paying them some strange way as opposed to a pension, or it's a way of giving them and also ties them into a non-disclosure agreement. I wouldn't put too much into that.
Oh, okay.
But
it allows him to be still in there talking to people, getting access to everything.
Well, he was only
having
one of the things was he would consult the new CEO. Chapek, and Chapek never asked for his opinions on anything.
Okay.
That really made him angry. Apparently, you couldn't walk into a restaurant in Hollywood, but Bob Iger was sitting at a table shouting loudly how awful Chapek it was.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So, but Iger started the rot. Chapek tried to solve that rot, tried to stop that rot. The institution is too rotten to do that. He needed to do a Elon Musk style mass firing. He wasn't able to do that, and now he's paid the price. And Bob Iger's in there, and more wokeness is coming. But look, let's be clear. This is all.
This is generalized. Yeah, we started watching we were decided to get in the holiday mood. You know, that we would start to watch Christmas movies and try and watch as many as possible. But just to get a sense of them, maybe we'll make our own Christmas movie one of these years. But we watched one last night, which was utterly awful. And the premise wasn't horrific, by the way. The premise kind of had promise. Set in the UK.
The movie is called Christmas at Mistletoe Farm.
Oh yes, so the premise is
let's just say it had a very standard romantic comedy setup.
That's right. No, the story line was great. The guy, the wife, the widowed man, the wife had died, 5 lovely children. Also unusual, by the way, there was 5 children. It was kind of great and all that. And, the smallest one of them, right, the littlest child, I think, maybe, or the second littlest child.
But then there was a child there. So there was a child there. Was that child 5?
The little boy?
Yeah.
Could have been. Something like
5,
that.
6, 7.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Maybe 6, yeah.
6, yeah. And he was wearing pink dresses, pink skirts, pink jackets.
Tinsel.
Sparkly
jackets. Kind of an Elton John look at times.
Yes.
This kind of thing.
So basically kind of a gay or transgender look for this 6-year-old boy. And just to let you know that, and also sometimes he wore rainbow stuff. Just to make sure, let me just tell you that, that wasn't an accident, because there was obviously these children had been through a trauma. Their mother had died, and they were moving to the farm that he had inherited, and they were upset because all the rest of the children were upset because their mother had died, and some of them talked about that, upset because they were moving, whatever. He was upset, and it was mentioned twice.
Well, twice in the amount that we watched, because we couldn't watch it. We started to not watch it, and we started to flick forward to see what next crazy outfit they'd put on this little person.
I'm worried that they won't like me. Yeah, actually, let's put up the pictures of him and his outfits. Yeah, there they are.
Hey, Buster, what's up?
I had a bad dream.
Oh, buddy, come here. You know that bad dreams aren't real.
Do we have to go to school tomorrow?
School is meant to be fun.
But the children might laugh at me.
Why would anybody laugh at you?
Because I wear sparkly things.
You know, Buster, There's absolutely nothing wrong with wearing sparkly things. Anyone can wear sparkles.
In other words, I'm trans. I'm a 6-year-old trans, and it's basically it's sending a message to children that that's 1 in 5 acceptable, and it's also sending a message to parents. You're letting your child down if you don't say to the child, "This is nonsense. This is nonsense on stilts," and you know. You go to school, you wear the uniform, you wear what you're expected to wear, and if you know, it's like these Columbine style killers who wear black and wear makeup at school, men, and then shoot up the school because people treated them different. You wore makeup and all black clothing every day of the year. You know, you were being asked to be treated differently, and you were. So stop. You know, I digress, but.
It just all feels very manufactured. It's all very manufactured, and it's all almost mathematically manufactured. It's like, as you say, 1 in 5. You know, there's 5 children, and then there's one that with a sparkly outfit, and then the really awkward kind of dialogue that they forced into this really bad film, which got worse by the moment. And you almost feel like the reason that it got worse by the moment was because they weren't prioritizing telling a good story. Yeah. They were prioritizing getting this kind of messaging out there that this was kind of, you know, this is the future.
This is the way. This is normal now.
Anyway, it's very depressing actually. You know, you're trying to watch, and it's funny. You know, when you look back at the year and stuff, and look at things that have been incredibly successful, it's amazing how people don't respond well to this woke stuff. People didn't respond well to the Disney film. They have not responded. They responded really well to Yellowstone, which we've never seen, by the way. Well, I think we might have watched one episode of it, but apparently Yellowstone has nothing woke in it at all, and that's the reason why people liked it. People responded really well to Top Gun. Again, super non-woke, quite feel-goody, nostalgic, kind of like the old style movies, and people respond to that, and it's like, you know, there's money to be made on that. Yes. You know, maybe we should be making those kind of movies. Movies that are, you know, pro-family, pro-life. And I mean pro-life in every sense of the word, you know, not desperately depressing, but actually very inspiring and beautiful and fun. And, you know, everything isn't appalling. That kind of thing. People really like that.
It's going to be very interesting to see how Bob Iger does as the head of Disney, because he won't have...
Or what he does.
Well, he won't have Bob Chapek's skirts to hide behind anymore.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. You know, there's been these movies, you know, will Hollywood learn that their efforts to use Hollywood to promote political causes that they care about, like, for example, the disaster they just had, we talked about it last week, with the Me Too movie. What was it called, Me Too? She said. She said
nobody listened.
She said and
nobody
no one.
Nobody.
She said and no one wants to watch it. You know, and you know, we were talking about I think we've talked recently about The Chosen. Again, you know, another example of interesting. You know, this is what people want. The Chosen series. We had Dallas Jenkins on here before. Massive success. With the Chosen series, and massive success during COVID. What did people want to watch? You know, people wanted to watch the life of Jesus, very inspiring, which they got to watch for free. Yeah. So, you know, as film says, you know, will Iger learn? Will he start making entertainment for the people, or will he continue to just satisfy the woke mob with this kind of unwatchable messagey movies?
We're talking about someone who destroyed the Star Wars franchise, who presided over the destruction.
That's quite an achievement.
It's quite an achievement.
Quite an achievement when you think about the Trekkies, how devoted they were. You know. Hello, what is it? What they call Trekkies? Are you looking at me like I've said the wrong thing? I don't understand now. Explain to me, Philip. Why? Are they not called Trekkies?
Star Wars.
Go on.
Versus Star Trek.
Oh, you're right. Oh, yeah, Worries, Star Trek. Yeah, Okay, that type of thing. Okay, moving on. Talk to us about the soccer film. Why don't we talk about the World Cup now? And I'll be quiet.
We actually watched the opening of Star Trek, the movie of the day.
Yes, we did.
Which is, in
film.
my opinion, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek
film
movie.
Thinks is operatic.
The opening of that is just operatic.
Perfection.
It's the prequel.
And there's actually operatic music, I think. The music's kind of dramatic. All right, Philip, tell me about the World Cup. What do I need to know about the World Cup for those of us? And by the way, it seems like it's going to go on for, you know,
ever.
Till the end of the year.
Yes. Well, we can't obviously watch that much of it because we're in Los Angeles.
The timing is tough. Isn't great for us.
But I saw there that a headline in the Los Angeles Times by Associated Press. So if I was to say to you, soccer upset, you don't know much about the results, right? Soccer upset sets off riots in Belgium, Netherlands.
Wow,
Right?
riots film.
Yes. Riots broke out
Shocking.
in several Belgian and Dutch
This is the
cities
Associated Press.
after Morocco's 2-0 upset win over Belgium at the World Cup on Sunday. What would you think when you saw that? So, let's say riots broke out in Belgian cities
Yes.
after Morocco beat Belgium 2-0.
That it was unexpected. Would be one
No,
thing
who
that-
would you think is rioting there?
Oh, yeah. Who would I think? Oh, that's a good one. Who do I think is rioting
The way
there?
that is constructed.
The way that's constructed, it sounds like Belgian people are
Yeah.
rioting
That's not correct.
and Dutch people are rioting.
It's Moroccan fans who are rioting.
Oh, that's
Moroccan
weird.
youth.
And why are the youth of Morocco rioting, Philip?
Because they can, because that's what they do. Because they're out in the streets in their thousands, and then they decide to do destruction, which is what happens. When
Hang on, they riot after they won.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, so the guys down at the Staples Center do that too. The Dodgers, they riot after they win. Fans, they attack police
Oh, that's
and
very
destroy
funny.
things.
And how did you find out? Did the Associated Press point this out for us?
No.
And how did you discover who was rioting?
I saw it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
When it was happening, and I looked at the people and going, okay, they're not Belgians, they're Moroccans. So it's thousands of youths on the street. They used to talk about youths, and they're not. They're Muslim youths on the street who are foreigners in that country, who do not share the culture or the values of Belgium and live in ghettos. And when thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, land on the street, take that opportunity to destroy property and attack the police.
Dear, oh dear.
But I mean, that's almost by the by. But I would expect the Associated Press not to be so deceptive.
Yes, it could have done a bit of a better deep dive into this
Well, no,
story.
they know-
Where did you get the real story, though? How did you find that?
Actually, it's funny. It's in an extended AP article about it. Brussels Mayor Philippe Close urged people to stay away from the city and said authorities were doing the utmost to keep orders. These are not fans; they are rioters. Moroccan fans are there to celebrate. Close said. In other words, the real fans are there, but it's these hangers-on, these Moroccan hangers-on. And then, sad to see how a few individuals abuse the situation to run amok, the Interior Minister said. Police in neighbouring Netherlands said violence erupted in the port city of Rotterdam, with riot officers attempting to break up a group of 500 supporters, soccer supporters, who pelted police. So those were, during enthusiastic celebrations by Moroccan fans, with many with immigrant roots in many Dutch and Belgian and Dutch
So there, they
cities.
finally identified who
Yes,
it was
yes.
with rioting. Exactly, as you say, the headline certainly didn't.
A headline and most of the story.
And most of the story.
So,
All right.
You may have given money to anti-trafficking charities. You may have given money to anti-slavery charities. You may be on the board of an anti-trafficking charity or anti-slavery. But look, these concepts, these are liberal concepts of vulnerable, infantilizing people from the third world, that they're always tricked into coming here. They're tricked by coyotes across the border. This is a business transaction where you get paid to be brought to America by the people who are being brought, paid well, and it's a business for these people. In fact, and they often don't want to treat the people badly because they can all text back to the people behind them saying, "Don't go with this coyote. Don't go with this person." So Britain, anyway, but because of liberal pressure and liberal not-for-profits and liberal advocates backed up by conservative advocates who fall for this, every country has this bipartisan legislation now where criminalising traffickers, criminalising it is a criminal enterprise, but there's two sides of the criminality: the trafficker and the person being trafficked. It's not trafficked; it's the person they're assisting in their migration. But now what's happened is they're being accused of slavery. And so Britain now has a slavery act that after Vietnamese women were found to be, and children were found to be brought into the UK and worked in forced to work in nail salons. Complete nonsense. Completely voluntary. What they also do as part of this legislation says if you say that you were forced to come here and work in these salons, America's the same. You can get visas. you can get criminal compensation, and you can get special benefits from the government. So, of course, the people who are arrested for visa infractions immediately say, I was trafficked here, I was slaved here. So the law came in, and of course, it's very, very difficult to prove slavery. That kind of slavery is very, very difficult. The witnesses are often unreliable. They'll make the allegation to get out of prison, and then they'll disappear back into the black economy. But what's happening in the UK is that drug dealers, like who are 19 and who have in their gang as 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, they use to transport their drugs or do whatever. They are now being prosecuted for slavery, for using 16-year-olds. They didn't transport anyone across borders. These guys are friends of theirs very often from the same housing estates. And of course, as the New York Times points out, it overwhelmingly targets black and brown people. So this is what happens when you give the cops sweeping, ludicrous powers. They will use these sweeping, ludicrous powers, but they will use them in the most convenient way possible. Not in the not launching complex investigations with people who don't speak English, who don't trust the cops, who will disappear into the black economy. They will arrest a drug dealer and to get a headline and to get a big sentence and to get promotion, they will also charge them with slavery if they can find out that some member of their gang was, and this has happened, some young fella, sorry for laughing, but, and the New York Times is outraged by it, but the New York Times was one of those organizations that ran all these modern slavery as a real thing nowadays.
So if you were a young fella,
Yes.
teenager who was working for a drug dealer and selling drugs, wouldn't it be smart of you
Yes.
if you got caught then to say, oh, I'm a slave, by the way?
Yes.
Exactly. And then you could get to go home and everything.
That's right. You're not prosecuted. You can actually get criminal compensation. You're a victim of crime then. So you can actually get compensated from the government for being the victim of a crime. And some 19-year-old junior drug dealer who was keeping you employed gets 10 years as opposed to 3 years. And he's normally black or brown because those are the people who do the street drug dealing in Britain and in a lot of other places in the world. So I think there's a message here for people who support anti-slavery, anti-trafficking organizations. This is a liberal, this is a way liberals try and disguise the transactional nature of people coming to this country, try to infantilize them, by the way, once you are a victim of a trafficking crime, by the way, you get a visa to stay here because you have to be a witness in a crime, and then you can't go home because you could be in danger because you're a witness to a crime. So it's a deeply corrupt immigration scam, criminal scam. Don't be a part of it. Write to us if you want more details. I'll send you all the articles. Actually, the link to this article in the New York Times, if you can bear to read it, will be in the show notes. What else? What's next, Anna?
We're going to go over now and talk to Magda about what it's been like for her to move to Central Texas. I know what it's been like for us when Magda moved to Central Texas.
Tell people who Magda is.
So Magda Segeda, who works with us, has worked with us for
15 years.
15 years, at least 15 years.
15 years.
We met Magda back in Dublin, right?
Yes.
Back in the day.
In the day.
And she has been she travelled with us first to Washington. First she worked with us in Dublin, then she worked with us in Washington DC. Then she temporarily went back to Poland for a minute, where we thought we'd lost her forever, and then she came back
to Los Angeles.
And no one in the history of time has ever loved California more than Magdalena Segeda, who then went off and moved to Central Texas. Let's go over to that interview right now. So we're now joined by our colleague and friend Magda Segeda in Central Texas. So what we're really looking for in this interview, just to let you know, Magda, is that you're deeply unhappy, regret terribly moving to Central Texas, wish you'd never gone, and that you're coming back and you're giving us dates on that. Is that correct, Magda?
Never coming back. But you guys have to come here. You have to come to Texas. That's the purpose of my interview here.
Sell us Texas, please, Magda. Can you sell us Texas, please?
I think the best thing are the people by far. So they exceeded expectations, and they are just incredibly nice, entrepreneurial and fun, and just outgoing, very family oriented, just kind of everything that we wanted for us, for our family. Um, so that's definitely was like the biggest bonus, because when you move somewhere new, where you never lived, and also, with a little bit of an accent, you just never know. I mean, I just assume all Americans are great and welcoming. But there was a tiny bit of apprehension because we never lived in the South, although Texas is like its own thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't really belong to the rest of the South, but it's a different part of the country, and you can definitely feel and see it. But there was a little bit of like, how are we gonna fit in? How are we gonna adjust? And that has not been a problem on any level. Quite the opposite. We feel very welcomed, and everyone is extremely friendly.
Well,
Could you give us? Could you give us a friend? Give me a for instance. Can you give me a for instance of a kind of thing that happened with people or a person that was completely out of your experience when you
Yeah.
lived here in California?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind, this is, I mean, there are many examples, right?
Okay.
There are really many examples, and I'll give a few. But like one kind of striking thing that happened was when I was, my husband was doing something outside the house. I was washing dishes at the sink, looking out on the street, and I see my neighbor, who's a single mother, very sadly widowed, is doing something with her tree in the front yard. And next thing, I see a pickup truck pulling up, and then someone gets out, and then my husband goes over, and there's like just this commotion over there. So I come out to see what happens, and it turned out that she was indeed trying to cut down some big branches from her tree in the front yard. And this guy in a truck pulled up and said, "My wife mentioned that you're working on this tree, and she just sent me over to help you. I have the tools in the truck." And then, of course, my husband, seeing that, went over to check what's happening and got involved. And suddenly, everyone is helping this single mom, cut down her tree. And I just thought, like, I never actually seen that. I think if you try to cut down someone's tree in LA, you probably possibly would get sued. So I think
Yes.
people just don't offer such services out of the goodness of their heart. But that happens here. So that's like one example. But another one would be that we, within a month of moving here, we had several families with kids literally just walk down the street because they're in their neighborhood for a dinner at our house, for a barbecue. And I said to my husband, like, we never had that in LA. It was just a different type of neighborhood. It was just a different type of community. Those things didn't happen. Everything was very scheduled. You had to drive somewhere. This was something very casual, including an instance where the kids were playing in the sprinklers, playing in the mud in the backyard. And then the parents, not wanting them to come through our house, just hose them down with a garden hose, put them in the back of the pickup truck, and drove them home that way. Now they were very close, right? So don't call it like child protective services, but just fun things like that we enjoy because they're different, and they're very. They make us feel just that we have a community here, right in our neighborhood that we never had before.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's get to the heart of this thing, the weather, Magda. So, I mean, I think the cliche that everyone says is that you leave California and everywhere except for here has this thing called weather.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're brought up in Ireland, we really appreciate the absence of weather.
As you were brought up in Poland, I'm sure you did appreciate the absence of weather.
And Magda did, and we know that. And Magda loved the weather here.
And nobody loved Southern California more than Magdalena.
We mentioned that in our introduction.
And much of that, I would say, was due to the weather.
And she liked
the
beach
beauty and the hiking. But we'll come to that.
But
so let's talk to the weather.
Let's just talk about weather.
No denying Southern California, the best weather in the world. And I knew that, right? So, you're giving, that's the main thing, you're giving up for freedom. But as you mentioned, I did grow up in Poland, where we have some serious winters. And just to mention, I'm very worried about this winter in particular, given what's going on with the, with the gas and energy supplies over there. I still have my family there, so that's a worry. Real winters. And so I just felt, I am willing to do this trade, but I I really don't want to go somewhere where the winters are severe. And I did quite a bit of research, and so there is weather in Texas, and there's crazy weather in Texas.
Yes.
However, it's not that cold for majority of the year. So that was kind of my compromise, that I'm gonna be possibly very warm often. I'm possibly gonna be a little chilly, but I'm not gonna be freezing for months on end. So that was my threshold, and I feel like I got it so far. But hey, it's not it. It's only November.
Oh, when did you arrive, Magda?
In May.
Yeah, well, I have a friend. I don't want to give out his name on air. Let's call him like Diedrich, for example. That's his name. So let's call him Diedrich. He arrived in Central Texas, actually not a million miles from you, in, I think, January. And this is a highly intelligent, traveled person who also came from LA and didn't realize that Texas had a winter. So one of the first things he had to do was run to Bloomingdale's and buy coats and buy winter stuff and socks and things that you don't have in LA. So you have a bit more time to do that, and you do acknowledge there is a winter there. But describe the average Texas winter, not the Ted Cruz goes to Cancun winter.
Yeah, so the reason your friend was not aware of the Texas winter is because the winter is not what Texas is known for, right? It's known for the heat and the summers. However, it became kind of, right, it got some headlines for the winter when during the freeze in 2021, where people died. And that was a very serious thing, and that was because they were there's we could talk a lot about it, but they were, apart from the major energy issue, and they were also just unprepared for the winter conditions because they don't normally experience them.
I have been to Magda's house, by the way, in Central Texas, and I think Magda and her husband have thought of all of this and thought about what if it got really cold. And Magda has a small forest of wood cut in the back so that they will have an open fire. No matter what happens, they will not be cold. I think is the point, right?
Well, we have a generator. It was one of the first things that we bought. And that was kind of like learning from this experience where people were chopping down the furniture during the freeze, trying to keep themselves warm, and putting children in coats and in the bed with them just to survive. Unbelievable that something like that could happen in a state that's so rich in resources, but it did happen. And so one of the first things that we did was we bought the generator, and we had to actually sadly cut down some trees in our backyard. We saved all that wood, and we have a working fireplace. It's one of those things where I also, and I was talking about this to my friends who moved to different, also fled California, looking for freedom in other places. And to me, as much as I hope that the government that we're paying the taxes to, is responsible, I also there's a kind of part of me that is there's an understanding where you're moving to a state where you are hoping there is less government interference, right, and less government influence on your life. You should also allow for the fact that the government might assume that you're also going to take some individual responsibility for your survival, if that makes sense. Trying to keep the government out of your life, also try to be prepared to help yourself. And don't always only count on the government to save you. However, you would hope that the things that you don't have control over are going to be taken care of by the government. But, we shall see.
Well, if the government takes the distribution of electricity for itself, and it takes the creation of electricity and heavily regulates it, I mean, it's supposed to be a trade-off. If it's heavily regulated, then the government, it's supposed to, there's a reason for that. It's supposed to guarantee continuity of supply and value for money, etc. And that's not what was delivered in Texas. I suppose that kind of brings in a thing, because unless you're living in the middle of nowhere, and I know you're not living in the middle of nowhere, you're living in a community, the chances of those communities becoming liberal or being liberal is high, or living close to a liberal place, a leftist place. Is that an issue? What are the leftists like? You must come across leftists even in Texas, especially in Texas, actually, probably. What are they like? Are they different from LA leftists? Uh, when they're in a minority in the state. Tell me about that experience.
What are the leftists like in the wild,
Yes,
Magda?
Magda.
Yeah,
Yes, give us a.
it's like a David Attenborough thing. It's like Magda is in Texas,
Yes.
and she has observed some leftists in the wilderness.
Arboretum librestos left.
Well, I'm very bad. I'm not looking for them. So I feel that Texas, it's still very reasonable, and especially when it comes to the things that were important to us when we were looking for a place, which is the treatment of kids, honestly, because we have a little one to raise, and what was happening in California was just absolutely, despicable. When it comes to school and masking and potential vaccine mandates, and just this feeling that you will no longer have the freedom to raise your child, with the values that you wish for them. So it's definitely a different world here still, where parents count, and where you can easily find communities that are kind of support the same values as you do.
When you talk about that, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, and I know you and I have talked about it before, Magda, that there's this fabulous that I'd highly recommend to people, fabulous Facebook group called Leaving California, where people leave in California and they tell their stories about, and it's brilliant, and people write beautifully and fabulously, and there's lots of funny stuff in there and heartwarming stuff. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, because obviously there's this issue in these red states that these people from blue states are coming, and it's like, oh my God, do not California my Texas, do not California my Tennessee or my Idaho. Have you met people and had them? What have you done to try to let people know really quickly that you're not going to be contaminating Texas with some leftist stuff?
That's funny, actually. I do have a special introduction where I say, when once people ask me where I'm from, and they probably are asking because of my accent more
Yes.
than because they know that I'm a newcomer. But I say two things. I say, we came from California, don't hold it against us. So they usually laugh. And then I also say, but we're not from there.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, we're not originally from there. We
Yes.
just happen to live there, and we didn't bring that mess on. And people are very friendly. But this is very interesting. And this past election, I think, showed that the most recent wave of immigrants from blue to red were people who are not going to vote for what they left behind,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think for many, many years, we know that, right? For many, many years, people were coming to Texas and Tennessee and other places like that, Florida, for other reasons, for economic reasons mostly, right?
Yes.
And to Florida because they retired. So that's a law. So I think the most recent wave were actually politically motivated people
Correct.
who were
Yes.
That's a
desperate
very-
to escape the California politics and policies. And they weren't going to, they were going to try to make sure they keep the freedoms in Texas,
Yes.
Tennessee, and other red states.
That's a very good distinction, actually. Yeah, because people, the ones from California in the last couple of decades moved to Colorado and changed it, moved to Montana. They moved very often as you say, because they can get a nicer house and a better kind of lifestyle. And there was a feeling that things weren't great in LA, but they weren't.
But they just couldn't understand why exactly.
They couldn't understand why, and of course the Republicans weren't explaining it to them because the California Republicans are useless. And then the pandemic, but also this descent into lawlessness and the homelessness on the streets, camping on the streets, and the toleration of that meant there are hundreds of thousands, if not a million people who have moved to these states. And I think you're correct. You see that in Florida, where Florida went from a purple state, 1% for Trump, 2% for Trump, to a massive swing to DeSantis. And that's all the people we know moving to Florida who are totally moving there only because of political reasons.
Yeah.
Only. They're not
Yes.
moving there for the,
Yeah.
well, why would anyone else move to Florida? I mean,
Well, the tax regime is pretty good too,
Yes.
by the way, and not having to pay state tax is a big thing. But yeah, no, I think this is new. I think this new set of people moving. It used to be that people were moving for economic reasons alone. Now it's very different. As you say, people are looking for freedom. They're moving to places where they feel that they could be free. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and I think also that having a child. I mean, this is something that I've learned. Like, there's nothing in the world that will motivate you to completely change your life for the benefit of your child. And I think all those people are. I mean, a lot of them are people with children who
Yes.
just suddenly saw that the state is not on their side, that the state is actively working against them,
yes.
that the state doesn't consider their authority as parents, and doesn't take into account what they wish for their children. And that's something that just hits really deep, and that will just motivate you to move and vote accordingly.
Yeah. And so your child is in a school where there's no masking, there's not even a hint of vaccine mandate or any of that, and that's a kind of you've got a kind of a guarantee on that.
Also, I assume that
have you got a guarantee on that going forward? I mean, what's your feeling on that?
I assume also that I assume that also there's no BLM, or critical race theory, or I mean, it's all part of the same package. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I have done a lot of research. I don't think those things, when you say guarantee, I don't think those things are guaranteed, unfortunately. I think that there are people who moved to red states for public schools, because they just imagined that it's just California, but education is kind of its own thing, right? And there's things that are pushed in top down from federal level, so I don't think that's a guarantee that if you're gonna move to a red state and send your child to a public school into the system, that they're gonna be protected from some of those awful things that they're pushing on kids these days. So I think you have to do a lot of research. So we actually also chose to go a private route. And I did a lot of research where I interviewed the founder and the director of their school to find out. My interest is that they teach my child to read and do math,
Yes.
and get along with other people.
Yes.
I don't need them to teach them other values, also including ours. Like, we can do that at home, But I need a school that's not gonna be in the way of those values, and that's not gonna actively work against us. And I don't think that's guaranteed in any public school anywhere in the country. So I know that my friends in other states chose to get involved, very actively involved in public school boards and meetings and hearings and all those things to try to preserve or change the course. But I think it's a risk. I think it's a risk because it's still government education.
One of the other things that I know that has been important for you in the move is that you found a fabulous church where there's an amazing community. And I know the last time we saw you there in Texas, that we saw a young person from that church came to babysit. Just a gorgeous, delightful young person. So what that's a huge difference also, maybe. I mean, what's that community like, and what's that church like?
Yeah, well, it was, we moved here and we didn't know anyone. So there was this question of how are we going to find good people, to surround ourselves and our child with. And church was the answer. So we did find a fabulous church. A church actually that focuses on the next generation, because they believe that's who's gonna rule the world. So they focus on the children, and we love that. And our kid is now surrounded by role models and fabulous teenagers, and just kind of a new world for us that we really enjoy. So that was a great way of integrating ourselves into community here, and I'd recommend that to anyone who's moving.
So she sounds pretty unhappy to me.
She does, yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, I
can
think
see.
I'm still holding
I can
out
see
hope.
that. You
I'm
know,
holding out hope. I'm
No,
holding
no.
out. I still have a hope. The hope I have is that it's, I think Magda's not going to move. But however, we need to have another interview with Magda after the winter, And just actually on that note, by the
I
way,
think she's putting on a
I
brave
want to just
face.
ask
Brave face.
I want to ask a quick question about the winter. You mentioned earlier in this interview, Magda, about Poland and about family members that you have in Poland. Can you just, because I think it's an important story that we care an awful lot about. What's the latest from Poland? Like, I think, did you tell me recently that people were lining up to buy coal? Am I right about that?
Yeah, so the last I spoke to my mom about this, there were lines for coal. This is like literally like a picture from a very dark past. And she also mentioned that there were already directives where some of the office buildings were only allowed to keep the temperature at certain level. To conserve energy. They also were only allowed 2 light bulbs, I think, per corridor or something like that, something along those lines. So there's already restrictions in rationing when it comes to energy, which is very worrying. And I can take care. I'm pretty sure I can find ways to take care of my mom. And send her some support and figure things out for her. But my other family there, but there are people who just don't have that type of help, and I just don't know. Yeah,
We interviewed Mark Morano recently, and he mentioned it in passing. I must bring him back on to talk about it. He said in parts of Europe, wood is more valuable than gold, right? Per weight.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that. I mean, you can't keep yourself warm with wood. I mean, with gold rather.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I mean, I think he meant that a piece of a delivery of wood costs more than a delivery of gold almost at this stage. It's per weight. I don't know. I wish I'd asked him more about it, but that's where we're at. People, as you say, are lined up in Poland for days, is it, or for hours to get coal?
Yeah, for days.
Yeah, it's very scary. The winter in that part of the world is a really serious thing, and staying warm and keeping your little child warm, it's just keeping an older person warm. Those people aren't as resilient. There's a real possibility that people are gonna die with this winter, and it's very scary, and it's hard to believe because those are developed countries.
Yes. I mean, we're going to be talking, the winter won't, the worst of the winter won't have happened by the time we come back on this show on January the 4th. And we'll be checking in on that story, checking in as well with you about what's happening in Poland. And we'll be checking in to see what's happened in Central Texas and how the winter is progressing there. Obviously, yes, and we will remain here for the moment, Magda. We will remain here in California amongst the leftists, where the weather is very fine. But unless you have another question there, Phelim, I think we have come to the end of this particular. I just feel like we need to talk to Magda again, Magda, past the winter. But for now, I
want to polygraph her as well.
Oh, really? All right, okay, because you're not 100% convinced.
I know tears of a clown are kind of that smile. That smile looks very fixed.
No. I think Magda's very happy in Texas. We're not happy that Magda's that's far away, but we will, watch this space.
Yes, watch this space.
This can be fixed. Other people can move closer.
This is also true. This is also true. Yeah. Okay, we've come to the end of this. Thank you so much, Magda.
Thank you.
We will be talking to you, and thank you for your time, and enjoy Texas.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. So all I have to say, Phelim, is that even though she says she's getting on really well, I mean, we miss her very, very much, and hope that maybe, I don't know, I think it's unlikely. I think she's very, very happy there. It sounds to me like she's very, very happy there. But it's very sad for us. But she's part of an amazing migration that we've
Yes.
seen across the country of people moving out of blue states. And there's, I think we mentioned that you're doing the interview there, but like there's this incredible Facebook page that honestly
Leaving
it's really
California,
worth becoming part of it. And you can join it even if you're contemplating it's called Leaving California, right, Phil?
Yeah.
And the stories and the people who write and the way they write and how beautifully they describe their situation, it's fascinating. But this is, as I said earlier, right, this is actually going to be our last podcast of this year. We will have another podcast on the 4th of January. And we want you, please remember to tune in then. We'll have a very big announcement. We're taking a hiatus, a sabbatical. We need to think about the next big thing, but we're also working on a big thing.
Yes.
So we can't, a couple of very big things that you'll be very happy about, and that will come with all the information about on the 4th of January.
What a year
but
we've
also,
had.
what a year we've had. It's been just extraordinary. I mean, so we had 3, pretty big projects. I mean,
Obviously, My Son Hunter was the biggest.
Obviously, My Son Hunter. So I'm going to come to My Son Hunter last, actually, as a result of that. I mean, we responded, and that's one of the things that we do. We're very nimble. We respond, and that, just to remind again, people, please, if you can, give what you can. We have this matching donor willing to give us $50,000 if we can match it. I think we're at something like, we're over $30,000 of the way there. So please help if you can with that. Because we're nimble. And if we have money, we can be nimble and we can react to things that are happening. And we reacted to J.J. Abrams, who decided to have a comedy about abortion in New York. And quite quickly, we put together a play based on the transcripts of the Gosnell trial and the grand jury.
The J.J. Abrams show was called Oh God, a show about abortion. Our play was Oh Gosnell, a show about the truth. And, it was on at the same time as the Alison Levy, J.J. Abrams show. And boy, did it get a lot of attention.
Incredible, yeah.
Whilst it was on, the Supreme Court decided to overturn Roe versus Wade.
Not exactly correct time-wise. What happened was the leak of the decision was revealed at that time. And obviously that became a huge story. But what we achieved by putting the play on in New York when we did was we forced the New York Times to acknowledge that there's actually more than one side to this story, and that in fact that a lot of things to do with abortion aren't even comical at all. And so twice we kind of had them, write very, long pieces about what we did and what we achieved with the movie. And I think that was very much the intention all along, was that mainstream media would acknowledge that, that we wouldn't let J.J. Abrams away with getting his comedy, wall-to-wall coverage without acknowledging the fact that that's not the whole story.
Yeah.
And here's the headlines of the two big stories that were done by the New York Times. And here's one of the parts that the New York Times said. The same night Levy's show opens in the West Village, a play that looks at abortion through a very different lens is scheduled to be held at a theatre in Midtown. Oh Gosnell, about Kermit Gosnell, the doctor who was convicted of murder in 2013 following botched late-term abortions. Not quite, actually, by the way. Not quite, actually, the truth there, by the way, at New York Times, following botched late-term abortions. No, following murder of babies.
Legal abortions very often, too. I know.
Yes. The case became a rallying cry for the anti-abortion movement. Phil McAleer, an Irish-born filmmaker and producer, said that he had seen Levy's show billed as an abortion comedy and decided to counter it by producing a play about Gosnell that draws its text from a grand jury report and trial transcripts, saying he wanted to give the audience an alternative viewpoint. That's a delicate way of putting it, right, Phil? The show has faced difficulties. And you remember this. This is another reason why your support is so important. As usual, with everything we do, we face difficulties, the kind of difficulties that the mainstream and leftists do not face, right? So here we are. We had a theatre booked for the play, and they cancelled on us at the last minute, and we had to, very quickly find another theatre that would take us on, and two of the seven actors walked out shortly before the previews were set to begin. Why would 2 actors walk out? What are you walking out from, by the way? Like, what are you walking out from? We didn't write a word of it. The play was not written. Not a word of the play was written by us. Not a word. Every word was a witness in the trial or a member of the grand jury, what the grand jury had said in the Gosnell case. We didn't write a word of it. And it goes on to say, the New York Times, intent on making sure the play goes ahead at its new venue, McAleer, who has made documentaries questioning opposition to fracking, gosh. And said he was working on a film about Hunter Biden. He more than doing that.
Yeah.
Said that he was still processing the Supreme Court news. It definitely means the Gosnell story is more relevant than ever, and plays about abortion are more relevant than ever, he said. So, you know, it was...
Then the other article, I quite like the other article. It was you know, this is the review. They reviewed both of them, I think, at the same time. A couple of miles uptown at the Chain Studio Theatre on West 36th Street is a show that is announced its New York run as Oh Gosnell, Truth About Abortion, a tabloid title with stalkerish overtones.
I love that. A tabloid title with a stalker film.
Especially given that its own news release mentions Levy's show. What, like, I'm supposed to pretend that the world doesn't exist outside the theatre? You know, I mean, a publicist for Oh Gosnell said the creation of the play was inspired by Levy's comic monologue. They laugh about it, we tell the truth about it, said the website of the play, now going by the name Oh Gosnell, a show about the truth. So it was great to force them to cover it, actually. I really, that was a major victory for me, I felt. But I'll tell you, it was an amazing play.
And it was an amazing play, and it's interesting. I don't have the piece in front of me here right now, but even the New York Times, who reviewed the play, had to acknowledge that one of the actors that we had in our was outstanding. And you know, and I think it was very funny. They had some line like, "And we really hope that she finds a better venue for her talent." You know, and it was like,
by the way, the play is gripping. Actually,
it's gripping because it's true, and it's gripping because of what actual people will say in a trial when they're telling the truth, and particularly, obviously, in this case, where they'd witnessed the most horrific of things.
Yeah, David Atkinson directed.
Yes, and David Atkinson directed, and was really, we were very lucky to have David.
And he played the prosecutor, played Ed Cameron.
Oh my God! I mean, because of the fact that we had the walkouts, that our director had to improv and become one of the actors himself. The other thing that we did this year that was another huge success and was a massive project, took us over a year to produce, was Serial Killer, a true crime podcast that came out. How many episodes, Phelim? Were there 7? Six episodes. And, you know, honestly, it went to the top 10 of true crime podcasts worldwide. Let's just listen here to the trailer. This is Serial Killer. My name is Anne McElhinney, and I'm an investigative journalist. I've never covered a story like the case of Philadelphia's Dr. Kermit Baron Gosnell. He's America's most prolific serial killer, and you've probably never heard of him.
A Philadelphia abortion doctor has been charged with 8 counts of murder.
I thought homicide was ridiculous, because I know I didn't commit any homicide. Didn't feel that I had done anything wrong at all.
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Huntingdon. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
Well, that wasn't my fault that they didn't inspect me. I thought that I was among the most qualified and highest skilled providers.
I often refer to him as like a Hannibal Lecter type person.
What we experienced was far beyond anything I could ever have imagined. And to realize what it was he was doing and how horrific it was.
It was a mill. It was a murder mill.
I didn't even know why I got arrested. The night they came for me, no one told me.
I just took to Twitter. I would look at a reporter and I would ask them personally, why have you not covered the Kermit Gosnell story?
When you then came to assist him and were working with him, I think you did take a photograph at one stage, didn't you, Adrian?
Yes, I did. I took a photograph.
Was that the baby boy?
Yes.
It's the most upsetting case I ever worked on. I never had a case that bothered me as much as this. It was horrible.
So people loved it, by the way. I'm just going to read a few of the comments, and you can find those comments if you go on Serial Killer Podcast, serialkillerpod.com. No?
Yes, yeah,
do I do that?
Serialkillerpod.com.
Or if you look on any place where you get podcasts, just type in Serial Killer, a true crime podcast. You'll find this. So here's what people said. Eliza said, "This is an amazing piece of journalism. You don't always have podcasts with such direct sourcing, but Anne McElhinney includes interviews she taped from several people involved in the investigation, including Gosnell himself. This is a disturbing and brilliant recount of how a narcotics bust interrupted a 40-year killing spree." Another person wrote, mystically engaging. Nobody does this kind of work better than Anne and Phelim. And then somebody else wrote, I've known Anne and Phelim for many years. They're consummate journalistic pros, but yet this series is the best offering yet, this person said. I've heard from them minute after nightmarish minute. I couldn't stop listening till the end. But then the thing that's really interesting about this, and, you know, kind of goes to the reason why we did this, because you know, we're still getting this story, this Gosnell story, out to the public because the mainstream media, you know, wanted to suppress it so much. So by making a true crime podcast, we got in touch with a whole lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have heard it.
I think there's other, actually below this, we've other praising, you know, this is Gillian, best murder podcast I've listened to. Then there's other people, well documented, unbiased look at the reality of a subject that most people do not want to hear about. I mean, amazing, amazing.
This is one of the best
reviews.
Murder podcasts I've ever listened to. Somebody wrote,
but
you know.
then we got well put together, important to tell, incredible, great job exposing.
Oh yeah, here's the one I like.
Yes,
you know, here's somebody embarrassed that it took me until episode 5 to realise. But the journalist has a clear motive, and it's to spread anti-abortion views. What's really what I love about that, thank you for writing that, and that person gave us a 1 star. They gave us a 1 star and wrote and watched and listened to 5 episodes. Right? See, 5 episodes. Now, I don't know, Phelim, about you, but if something has a 1 star rating, right? Or if my feeling about a thing is that it has 1 star, that it's really bad, I don't think I'd listen to 5 episodes. Would you listen to 5 episodes of something that was really bad? So what happened was, and we have a lot of these, and it hurt us in a way because it brought our star rating down. Because we basically had 5 stars from everybody, and then we're down to I think 4.2 or something. I don't know what it is right now. But these people who were really, really angry at themselves for having listened to 5 episodes and then realising, as they say, but I mean they didn't realise anything. What they realised was the truth.
There's another
and they
one.
hated it.
Yeah.
They realised the truth was what happened.
That's right.
They were, suddenly everything they had thought about abortion had been challenged, and they were really angry.
Yeah.
Angry at themselves, not
That's
angry
right.
at the truth.
Yeah, there's another one called it propaganda. It took me a few episodes, but it became, this is anti-abortion propaganda.
Yeah, and then the next one beside that, you know, I too finally, this is a completely different person, gave up in the 5th episode. You gave up in the 5th episode. Just to understand what we're talking about here, that's 5 hours later you gave up. You gave up in the 5th hour, and it's like, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, thank you. Job well done to me and Phelim.
Yeah.
You know, because honestly, that was our idea, was to get to that audience who don't want to find out this information. And we made them find out. And we're very proud of that.
And of course, we released the My Son Hunter movie, hugely successful, massive coverage, of course, about the life and shenanigans of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the Biden family corruption. A brilliant movie, huge critical response, and the people who we thought would hate it said they hated it, but the people who we wanted to watch it watched it. It's an amazing piece of work, directed by Robert Davi, written by Brian Godawa, starring Lawrence Fox, Gina Carano, John James, an all-star cast actually,
And the idea was always that we wanted, you know, this story had been suppressed. You know, the New York Post story had been suppressed. Twitter had suppressed the New York Post story. You know, this had been, and you know, this is an extraordinary thing that happened in American politics. A story of this magnitude before an election had been suppressed. So we made this movie that would force the mainstream to acknowledge what happened. And did they acknowledge it? My God.
But then we got Breitbart to distribute it, and that really sent it into another stratosphere.
100%. And like, for example, just to give you some idea of some numbers, and also we're going to look at the media in a moment. But you know, on Twitter, all-time impressions. So the number of people basically on Twitter who are reading and listening and finding out about the film, you know, over 21 million people. You know, on Facebook, 6 million people on Facebook. You know, with the trailer, I think has been watched now by about 8 million people on different platforms.
Yeah.
And here's what people thought of it. You know, and this is just a couple of people. You know,
Yes.
I just picked a couple of these. Barbara Johnson just watched the movie with family and wanted to tell you both how great we all thought it was, loved it, and the portrayals. Thank you so much for making this film and presenting the information in such an incredible way. Beautifully filmed, written, and fantastic actors. Then the next one, Phelim. My Son Hunter,
is maybe the most effective conservative movie I've ever seen. The satirical approach mixed with facts was a brilliant idea. The second half of the movie plays well to the emotions. It really does, actually, which we know is what governs the left. Highly recommend My Son Hunter. And Brian Godawa came up with this idea of breaking the fourth wall. He came up with the idea of that kind of irreverent comedic approach, and it really was the only way to tell this story, because you can't take this story seriously, but it's about a very serious topic.
Billy Zig, writing on Twitter, I just watched the movie My Son Hunter, and I got to say that I highly recommend it. And if the movie was about Trump, it would be a #1 at the box office right now. And I do not endorse Trump. This is what this guy is saying. I endorse the truth. And it's, and on and on and on. Lots of people saying, really positive things. And what happened was,
let's look at the media.
Let's have a look at it. Yeah, exactly. Let's have a look at the media.
I'm just going to read it. So much media. The New Yorker, 2,000 words. Mind you, a lot of this is negative, but it's not negative in the movie's terrible. It's negative in they don't like the topic. They don't like the subject matter.
Yes.
The Washington Post, the Daily Mail has written about it several times. Rolling Stone.
We're just looking at those headlines. We're going to put those headlines up there.
Put them up there. Newsweek, Spectator, Politico, Daily Wire, Revolver, Outkick, The Guardian.
Headlines. Read some of those headlines there.
I don't know. Well, actually, let me see. There's Revolver. Full My Son Hunter trailer released, and it's funny. Politico, the premiere of the Hunter Biden movie was as wild as you'd think. Spectator, My Son Hunter, a film to terrify the White House. Newsweek, Hunter Biden's lawyer tried to infiltrate the set of the new film. This is true. He did. Hunter Biden's lawyer. By the way, whatever happened to the ethics complaint I put in?
We have to hear about that.
I put an ethics complaint in about Hunter Biden's lawyer infiltrating our set and not telling us he was Hunter Biden's lawyer to spy on the movie. And I put it in, I believe, the 23rd of September. And they're supposed to let me know within 60 days about the progress of the complaint.
So we should be there now.
I think we should be there. And the moment I finish this podcast, I'm going to phone their hotline, which I bet you is not that hot, actually, and ask for the progress.
So did Los Angeles Magazine write about us as well?
Oh, yes, but they slammed it. Yeah. My Son Hunter is a mess, even for red meat propaganda. It's by Sarah Stewart, who then, in the middle of the article, drops that she hasn't actually seen the movie.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yes.
And I think the Daily Cost did the same thing, right?
Yes,
we had these people.
The Daily Cost and Guardian wrote a total of 5,000 words in advance of the movie coming out, and they hadn't seen the movie. So that is, you're over the target when you're getting shot at by people like these.
And what happened?
And by the way, it's all because of you. We could not have made this movie without you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And by the way, our whole intention all the time was that the mainstream media would acknowledge this story, would acknowledge the laptop, would talk about the laptop. And literally, I actually think the timing of this is extraordinary. Literally October the 26th, about a month after the movie came out, and there was all the media hoorah that went with that. We had the New York Post reporting. Well, but actually, it was reported everywhere. Jon Stewart, the darling of the left, the absolute darling of the left, comes out and slammed Hunter Biden's Burisma job as a corruption, as he called it, corruption straight up. Now, here's a question, Phelim. This, to me, this Jon Stewart thing, the timing of this is because of the movie. It is because there was so much written about the movie. Because where were you, Jon Stewart? Where were you, Jon Stewart? The Burisma information, that's been out. That is known. But you were quiet about that, Jon Stewart, until it became a thing where you're everywhere that you read. So the Rolling Stone, so the Washington Post, so the New York Times, so all these places, the Guardian, all the darlings that you love, were writing about our movie and bringing up the fact. And one thing that all of them, and we mentioned this before, the fact checkers got really quiet about our movie. We had everything written about our movie. We had everything written about our movie. This is the worst movie ever made. All that kind of good stuff that you can expect, because they hated the fact that we were making this movie. The one thing that they didn't do, it was which you'd imagine would be the big thing to do, was have the fact checkers go for it. But that's the last thing they wanted to do, was have the fact checkers, because now they've already, they're at that stage where now, and because of us, they've basically acknowledged the laptop is real.
Did you see CBS last week, 2 years?
Last week, 2 years later.
After it was banned on Twitter, 2 years after it was banned on Facebook, 2 years after the media said it was Russian disinformation, CBS have now said, actually, it's true. Everything there is correct.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of the show. Again, we want to just say we are thankful, very, very thankful for you. I know you're going to miss us. We hope you're going to miss us. But it's good. It's good for us to focus on these very large projects for next year. And when you find out what we're doing, you're going to be very excited and very happy about that.
And tune in
on January the 4th. January the 4th, very big announcement. Very big announcement of something that's happening in January that you will be very happy to find out about. And I won't say more on that But we will wish you a very happy Christmas and
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And again, if you can, please get involved in the matching grant that we have to fulfill before the end of the year. As I said, it's $50,000 that we won't get if we don't get $50,000 in matching. Now, unreportedstorysociety.com. Unreportedstorysociety.com.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.